Good afternoon, everyone, and evening. This is the numbers guy, Ron Stoffel, and welcome to our show today. I have two guests with me. On my left is Barb Anderson, and on my right is Walter Hudson, and they will introduce themselves. Today's discussion is going to be on the anti-bullying legislation, otherwise known as the Safe and Supportive Minnesota Schools Act, and that's H.R. 826 and Senate File 783. So we'll talk about that as to why my air quotes are for that, because you'll find that out as we go. But I'd like to have my guests introduce themselves and their organizations that they are with and a little background. So why don't we start with you, Barb, and just give the audience a little bit of an introduction as to yourself and your organization.
Okay. My name is Barb Anderson, and I'm with the Minnesota Child Protection League. This is an organization that was formed last August over a united interest and concern about HF 826. And we are really a coalition of many pro-family organizations that have come together. It is truly a grassroots organization. The Minnesota Child Protection League, we do have a website, mnchildprotectionleague.com.
Okay, great. And Walter, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and kind of why this issue is important to you.
Sure. I am a contributor to PJ Media, which you can find at pjmedia.com. I sit on the boards of a number of right-leaning organizations. I'm a conservative activist. I got involved in politics during the advent of the Tea Party in 2009. And the reason this issue caught my attention is because, it strikes me as a direct attack on not just the freedom to express yourself within our public schools, but the freedom to be yourself, to think a certain way. And we'll get into more detail about it. But, to me, the crux of what this legislation does in practice is exactly what they claim it's trying to prevent, which is to punish people for being who they are and expressing what they believe.
Okay, very good. And this is going to be a two-part series. We are going to talk first on kind of the basics, the foundation, and then get into more detail in the second half of our discussion and some examples. So what I would like to lay out first is my understanding, and then you two can kind of correct me if I miss anything, as to kind of the history of how this started. My understanding that there are two prongs to where this started. There's a Anoka-Hennepin School District law battle that went on, and then there was Governor Dayton's Minnesota Prevention and Bullying Task Force that was created, I believe, in 2011. And then in 2012, the original legislation came through. And my understanding is both of those were related to bullying, both from a cyberspace standpoint, looking at it from that standpoint, and secondarily with a specific class of individuals and suicide-related activities around that. And then a bill was, after the task force came together, I think that they recommended that a bill be created, and one was both in the House and the Senate, and it actually passed in 2012 in the House, but ran out of time in the Senate. So that's kind of a basic framework, but maybe you can both explain a little bit more detail of how the task force was put together, and then how the Anoka-Hennepin law legal battle that I think was the federal government that came in as the plaintiff in that, and they became the defendants. Is that correct?
Yes, the Southern Poverty Law Center joined forces with the federal government.
Okay.
And brought a lawsuit against our school district, Anoka-Hennepin School District 11, which is the largest school district in the state. And it's very interesting that U.S. Assistant Attorney General Thomas Perez said that this lawsuit settlement is to be not only a model for the state of Minnesota, but a model for the nation. It is the blueprint. So that's why we are very concerned about this bill and where it is going.
Okay.
And I just want to say also that at the Minnesota Child Protection League, we are very much opposed to bullying of any kind against any child. But as Walter said, this bill is not about bullying. It is really about the power of the state coming in and taking over and shaping the minds and the attitudes of the children in Minnesota.
Okay. And Walter, you want to add anything to that brief discussion, but at least those two items first?
Yeah, Barb is probably more well-read on the specific dates and history of where things legislatively came from. What I can speak to is the ideological agenda.
Okay.
And very clearly, if you track this thing in a larger context of other legislation which has been successful, we recently saw gay marriage legalized in this state, and the movement behind that. This is kind of phase 2 of that agenda. And what I mean by that is that what's being sought for by the activists who are in support of normalizing homosexuality in the culture isn't just equal rights. Equal rights is the rhetoric. And equal rights, I'm for.
Great.
I'm all about equal rights. That's fantastic. We should have that. What they're searching for is control of state power to force a cultural change. That's what this legislation is all about. By taking top-down bureaucratic control of the schools, they hope to actually be able to form the minds of young children into the image that they have preconceived. To accept, at this point, the agenda is to accept a particular social strata.
Right.
But long term, it could be anything. I mean, once you've established this kind of state control of what it's okay to believe or not believe, to think or not think, there's no limit to what you could fill in the blank that with. So, you know, the fact that it has something to do with homosexuality today is almost a non sequitur, because tomorrow it could be anything that whoever has the reins of power decides to impose from the top down on our schools.
Okay. I think that's a good segue into something that is up on the website for the Minnesota Child Protection League, which is a diagram, and I will put this up when we do the editing, but it lays out kind of the structure of the enforcement. It has the Minnesota Prevention of Schools Bullying Task Force, and then we have this new area called the Minnesota School Climate Council. And then we have the Minnesota School Climate Center, which I think we're going to need to explain briefly what these two new bureaucracies, I'm assuming that these are created at the state level, are really for. So between the two of you, I didn't read much on this. I just looked at this and it's like, it just looks like something that one is going to be overburdensome, and we'll get into the cost of it and who's going to pay for all this. But really, what is the reason creating another bureaucracy in the education system to enforce something that, again, we already have laws. So this is a new, our overarching law over and above what we already have.
It's all about control, and it's about a loss of local control. This will be the state taking over and being responsible for all areas of bullying issues.
Okay.
And the thinking behind it is the reason that at the top you see the governor's task force report, because that is the thinking that is behind this entire bill. And it's so important for people to read that. We have that up on our website as well.
Good.
And in that task force report, it refers to students must have an understanding of human sexuality. What does sexuality have to do with bullying? Nothing. And that one line right there reveals the political agenda behind this. Because as Walter said, you know, it's about the homosexual issue, but that's only a part of it. It is about exposing kids and normalizing every type of sexual diversity. It is about unrestricted sexuality for all children. And this will come in through the new inclusive curriculum and the types of training that will be done in the classroom and for the teachers.
Okay.
And the reasoning behind this reverse pyramid that you see here on your notes, you know, the vast new authority. And it's actually appropriate that they chose to model it the way they did with the community down here, really small at the bottom,
Covered by all of
piled on
right.
top of by increasingly expansive levels of bureaucracy going all the way up to the Prevention of School Bullying Task Force. The School Climate Council, that's a new board, kind of like we all love the Met Council, right?
Oh, lovely, yes.
This appointed
Appointed
board,
board, yep.
yeah, a unelected board that has a taxing authority. They were originally intended to take care of buses and sewers, and now it's just expanded into this huge bureaucracy that does all kinds of things and pigeonholes what the municipalities themselves can actually do. This is the creation of a new entity like that. Only their jurisdiction, to start with, is going to be determining bullying policy for every school in Minnesota. So we can, just by that comparison alone, we can start to imagine what kinds of things this new School Climate Council might end up grabbing onto as their scope, as all government entities tend to do, continues to expand. What's going to stop them from getting their fingers into deeper and deeper things?
School climate can be vastly increased beyond bullying or even, safe and supportive schools act activities. So then we have the council. What is the center then? Is that some type of research facility underneath them?
My understanding of the School Climate Center is that is a new subdivision of the Department of Education at the state level that is created, that's accountable to the School Climate Council. So you can't just have the bureaucrats. You've got to have their enforcers at the state, and that's what that would be.
Okay.
And that is a multi-agency center, and this Minnesota School Climate Center, and all of the schools will have to report to that center, where they will have a big system of tracking all the data on bullying. They will be in charge
data
of that.
collection. Okay.
Yes. One thing that's interesting too is that the governor's task force report writes about this sense of urgency, because we have to get this passed. We have to get these centers up and running because we have so many incidents of bullying, which is not true. In fact, the Minnesota Student Survey shows that incidents of bullying are down, kids that are doing the bullying and those that are victims of the bullying. So our programs, our policies that local school districts have are working. So there is no sense of urgency. There's something else at play here.
Well, and they're not ambiguous about what the something else is. If you read the Prevention of School Bullying Task Force report, they're very clear in specifying that they're not satisfied. I mean, why do you need to have a new bureaucracy to tell? Can't you trust school boards? Can't you trust administrators? Can't you trust parents? Can't communities come together and decide what is and isn't bullying and how they're going to deal with it? Well, the problem is that parents and teachers and administrators thus far have been doing what we traditionally think of as discipline. And that is, when Bobby hits Billy, we discipline Bobby. We provide a consequence for that objectively inappropriate behavior and correct the behavior and make it clear that that's not something that's acceptable in our school. That's bullying. We understand that. We're all against that. That they're not satisfied with that. They want to take it to the next level of, why did Bobby do that? We need to get into the psychology of what's wrong with his thinking that is causing him to do that. And particularly if it's something that is a hot button politically charged issue, we need to go in and correct his thinking. That's a whole nother level above and beyond anything that we've dealt with in the school system before. And it's very frightening when you attach the power of the state to a scrutiny of a child's thoughts.